From the economy to government and newsmakers to what's going on in your community, this is CW14 Focus with Robert Hornacek.
Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Robert Hornacek. Today we're focusing on higher education, specifically the University of Wisconsin system. I recently sat down with UW System President Ray Cross to talk about where the system has been, where it is today, and where it's going. Well, let's begin, I guess, with the biggest issue facing the UW system, and that's the budget that you just went through. Kind of assess where the UW system is today in light of those budget challenges.
Well, we're attempting to work through these challenges at each campus, and obviously we are trying our very best, and I know each chancellor is, to not let this impact the student experience. Our goal is to approach it in such a way that we're dealing with the streamlining and the reorganization or the reforming of back office, administrative, non-instructional functions. However, given the size of these cuts, I doubt seriously if we can maintain that. I think a second element that's important is the university does need to reform its administrative operations. And when I use the word administrative, I'm referring to non-instructional activity. How do we provide quality support services, quality back office operations without it impacting the classroom? And that means we need to modernize, we need to streamline, we need to re-engineer our processes, we need to implement lean practices, and that's what we are attempting to do. I think there's another element to the time frame that a lot of people don't understand. In a university, when you make cuts of the size we're talking about, you have to realize we have made commitments to students for 4 years. You just can't turn the organization on a dime quickly. It takes time. So you're seeing these metered out over a longer period of time. So the impact will be measured in a 2, 3, or even 4-year time frame, as opposed to an instantaneous kind of reduction like you would see at a corporation.
How large of a cut was it when all was said and done?
It originally started out as a $351 million reduction to our operations. The truth is there were some legislators who wanted to increase that. So in the end, we ended up with a $250 million reduction, and then another 25 annually that was lapsed. So in essence, it was reduced to 200 million in the end, which is a sizable reduction, but certainly much better than where we started.
In essence, do you see that as a victory given where the process started?
I do, but a lot of others would not. So I need to be fair and try to explain that. Any cut of this size, it's very hard to say, well, we were victorious, because this is a substantial cut. And one has to realize that it comes on top of a series of significant reductions previously. Regardless of party or political affiliation, this is a significant cut. The difference in this cut is that we were forbidden and are forbidden from increasing tuition. So this had to be absorbed fully, not adjusted or partially absorbed, as has been the case in the past. So this is a sizable cut. The reality is it was going to be a much larger cut, almost twice as large. And to realize that we reduced it in half in an era and an environment like we were in, I think is a victory, though it's very hard to wave the flag when you still get hit with a $200 million cut.
There are also a lot of issues around the edges of this budget cut, things like tenure, things like shared governance questions. Let's just, question about tenure is, where does that stand today? Does it, and I know there are some people out there who scratch their heads and say, why does that make sense in this day and age? Why should a professor have that much job security when the taxpayers don't?
I think the average person misunderstands or doesn't understand tenure. Probably there's never been a more important time for tenure. It isn't job security, it's job protection, so that someone can do research, pursue the kinds of activities they think need to be pursued in the search for truth. And the history and the creation of tenure was designed for that purpose. In some cases, clearly there are abuses of that, but 99% of the time that is not the case. Now, having said that, the state of Wisconsin had within its state statutes a protection for tenure. That has been removed from this statute, as you said, Robert, and now the university has to adopt a policy, because we obviously need tenure, and it has to be the type of tenure that cannot be noticeably different from our competitors. Otherwise, we will not attract or retain quality faculty. So we're working on that right now with the tenure task force. That task force is made up of about, I think, 17 or 18 individuals who already hold tenure of the 23 members. So it's designed to focus on the essence of tenure. We're soliciting input from the AAUP. What are their guidelines? How do we compare with institutions like Michigan, Penn State, Maryland, Iowa, and so forth? So in the end, we will be very much like them. It's my opinion that we will actually be in a better position than we were in, because there were some vulnerabilities, some gaps in what the existing state statute did. But I'm deeply committed to tenure. I think it has to be responsible, fair, and appropriate. Its purpose has to be clearly defined. I believe also in this task force we're attempting to define a more consistent post-tenure review process, because tenure shouldn't be a job for life if you're not performing. There should be a way of dealing with that effectively. There is. Let's visit that and let's make sure we're doing it properly. But there also should be a reward mechanism if you're doing well. At this point, there is not.
Do you think people might, in the general public, might not realize that there are protections like that? Because I think some people out there just view tenure as, oh, that's job security for life.
Well, having gone through the process of securing tenure, which is a rigorous process, and depending on the type of institution you're working at, it is a very difficult process. So once you acquire tenure, it should be just as difficult to remove it. And a lot of people don't understand it, because faculty need to take controversial positions. If they're researching something that is controversial, they need to have the right to do that. That's what the academic community is about. Now, the process of stifling that or inappropriately eliminating a person who has tenure, an arbitrary process, I find offensive. It has to do with performance in their job, and it has to do with, in my opinion, are they pursuing their search for truth within their research area of expertise?
A lot of this, I know from watching previous interviews you've done, has a lot to do with the public perception of the university system. Where do you see, how do you see the public viewing this system today?
Well, I think it's not much different than the national audience viewing the university. There is a declining view of the university on the part of the public. It's interesting, the surveys that have been done, we look at ourselves positively. Oh, we're great, this is wonderful, well, this is a tremendous thing. We're still held in high esteem by the public, but not nearly as much as we used to be. Why is that? There are a couple of factors that I think are important. A lot of people just don't realize the impact the university has on their lives. We're disconnected from them personally, unlike we used to be. When farmers in the early years of the decades of this century were dramatically increasing their productivity because of the university and extension influencing their lives. When families were seeing dramatic changes in their lifespan and in their health, it was just apparent, wow, the university is really making a contribution. Today that's disconnected, and we need to reconnect that. Today, we're going to see yield rates on corn exceed 300 bushels an acre very soon. We already do if it's irrigated. I can hear my father now. Are you kidding me? 300 bushels? That's unbelievable. And that's a result of university research. When you think about that, it's also true when you talk to families or manufacturers. The impact the university has had in not only research, but the quality of employers they're getting. Oshkosh Truck just acquired or just secured this significant contract for this vehicle for the military. Tremendous, tremendous design. I don't know how many hundreds of people worked on that design, but I do know a vast majority of them were UW graduates.
Do you think part of that public perception kind of falls on the university system itself, and maybe the university system hasn't been doing a good enough job of telling those stories and connecting those dots in this day and age?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Robert. I really do. We have to do a better job of communicating that. But also, I think in some ways we come across, and it's inherent in this type of job, we come across as arrogant and disconnected, not connected to the average person. And that shouldn't be the case. The more educated one is, the more humble they should be, because they realize how little they really know, how much more there is to know. And I think it's important that the university be connected to the average person, not be perceived as an academic elitist living in an ivory tower. And that's the real impact of the university, changing the lives of the everyday person, day in and day out, over the long haul.
And stay with us. We'll be right back with more from UW System President Ray Cross. And welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Robert Hornacek. Today we're focusing on the UW system, and here's some more from my conversation with System President Ray Cross. Tell us about this strategic planning that the system is doing right now, kind of what it is and why you're doing it.
Well, some would say this is a difficult time to do that. Why are you talking about that? You should be focusing on this budget. You should be focusing on several bills in the legislature. Totally agree. I understand that. But that's exactly why we need to be doing strategic planning. What does the future hold? It's hard for the public to understand, and a lot of folks, businesses and corporations, deal with some of this as well. We're not dealing with a 2-year cycle here. In order to make changes in the university that will impact I need to start working on them now. I've got a minimum of 4-year cycle here. If I do something today to change a curriculum, it's going to take 4 years before that student graduates and is available in the marketplace. It's true with research. Research can be a 20-year period. So part of what we're attempting to do with the strategic planning process at this phase is engage in this environmental scanning process. And that's a fancy term for listening to what stakeholders want 8 to 10 years in the future. What is it that people of this state expect from the university? What are their aspirations and dreams? How could the university be more engaged in their lives? What could we do that would benefit them much more than what we have done, which is significant. Nevertheless, in order for us to change and to adapt and be a more engaged university, better serving the people of this state, businesses and communities, we need to understand what they want for the future and how we fit into that. Because our future is inextricably interconnected. I can't disconnect the university from the people of this state, nor should I. And I want them to feel that this is their university, not just ours.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Before you became president of the UW system, you were chancellor of the UW College as an extension for 3 years. How did that experience help prepare you for this job?
Well, probably, or maybe it didn't, I guess I should say, Robert, but probably in 3 ways it helped in these ways. Number one, it took me all over the state. Extension is in 72 counties, and I was in most of them. So I became familiar with the breadth of this state. The colleges are in 13 locations around the state too, most of them reasonably small communities or smaller communities. So I got a picture of that and an understanding of the kinds of people that make up the majority of this state. And secondly, I think the mission of extension in college is all about access. How does the average person access higher education, university? How do we get in contact? We are having problems with the spittle beetle on our alfalfa, or our yield rates here. Man, we've got this rust material. What's going on here? This mold or fungi. How do we deal with it? It connects you to the people of the state by its very nature. Okay, the university needs to research that. We need to follow up on that. That's the function of extension. And it's interesting because when Catherine Kramer Walsh did research on what people like about the university, first thing they said was the football team and the band about at Madison. Third thing was extension. And why is that? And it was right up there with those other two, because extension was, the people from extension were living in their neighborhoods. They saw them as one of them, not disconnected from their problems, but very much connected to their problems. And I think that's a lesson that I'm bringing to this job that is very helpful. How does the university get connected to your issues, to your concerns, to the person who's got a factory job, who is welding this day in and day out, whose family is struggling with trying to figure out, how do I send my kids to college? I don't know where the next meal is coming from, or how can I afford this kind of insurance? How does the university participate in that? Or maybe their mother is suffering from Alzheimer's, and we're doing research on that. Fantastic research. How do we engage them in that and help them understand we're trying to improve your life?
One thing that's been discussed kind of on the outer edges of some of the budget talks that I've heard was about what some call the duplication between the technical schools and the two-year colleges. I'm guessing I know the answer to this since you worked so closely with the two-year colleges. What do you say to those folks who say, well, that's really duplication and we should either merge those systems or get rid of one of them?
Well, what I say to that is that other states, those are merged in other states, so administratively that's, I think, very feasible, and I'm certainly not opposed to that if they want to talk about that. I think what we have to look at is, are there really monetary savings there? And I would argue that the primary reason for any merger, if you study merger theory, and I've gone through 3 mergers, one in the corporate sector, one in higher ed, and one in foundation. If you study merger theory, you put organizations together for strategic purposes. Why would I join this company with that company? Well, I want access to their markets, they want access to my markets. I can use their distribution system, maybe we have better manufacturing, etc. In this particular case, you look at this, well, how can we better serve the people of Wisconsin? Can we do it better together? And there may be savings. I don't think they're going to be that significant. But if that should be the secondary or not the primary purpose from my perspective.
And stay with us. We'll come back in a couple minutes and we're going to wrap up our conversation with UW System President Ray Cross. You're watching CW14 Focus. And welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Robert Hornacek. Today we're focusing on the UW system. Here's the end of my conversation with UW System President Ray Cross. You're a decorated Vietnam veteran. What do you, and you served in the U.S. Army, when you look back on that experience in your upbringing, what shaped you think into the man you are today that's sitting here as the president of the UW system?
Well, I can point to, I was raised on a farm in Michigan, a small, poor dairy farm, and we had to do so many different things. We had to make things work. I called my experience as a kid the MacGyver experience, because you had to learn to fix things and make things work. A lot of that applies to what we're doing today. So you become a quasi, certainly not an expert, but a quasi-engaged person. You know, I have a welder at home, I do this, I build things, that's just part of who I am. And I think a lot of that, how do we fix this? How do we correct that? What can we do to adapt this? That's one issue. My military experience, taught me perseverance, and you build this compassion for the people that you're with. Then I'm not just talking about my fellow soldiers. I'm talking about the Vietnamese people in my case. You build this incredible compassion, and you have an understanding. You develop that understanding of what a different culture is like and how they're struggling to survive. What does that do for me? How can I help, and what should I be doing as a human being to serve my fellow man, regardless of where they are? I think that global picture is so important for our students today. We're part of the world, economically, socially, culturally. What they're doing in China right now is affecting our stock market, our economy. How do we develop within our students not only the ability to work in a global economy, but to participate effectively and appropriately as a democracy in a world that isn't all a democracy? And I think that's something I agree. The other part of that is, and as in some sense, Robert, a humorous comment. It's in this job you get a lot of criticism, and much of it's deserved. So I'm not suggesting that it isn't deserved, but you learn you get thick skin for that. And I always say to myself, at least they aren't bullets.
Where would you like to see the UW system in 5 years? I know you're going through the strategic planning process and all of that right now, but you personally, what would you like to see this system look like 5 years from now?
If we were to survey the people of Wisconsin in 5 years, I would hope they would say, the university has really made an impact on my life. And I would hope they would see that tangibly, feel it tangibly in their lives. I would also hope the business community would view us as a much closer partner. It's incredibly important as the population of this state ages and there are fewer working age adults, that the university plays a role in not only attracting but retaining college graduates to serve and work in this growing economy. If we don't do that, we're going to be in a difficult situation in another decade. The university has to play that role. I would also add that the university has to understand the needs of the state more clearly and better engage in solving and serving and meeting those needs. And that includes the economy of this state.
And I don't know if you have 2 years or 5 years or 10 years left in this position, but when your career at the system is done, what do you hope people will say, oh, Ray Cross, when he was the president of the system, blank? What do you hope kind of what you leave for your successor?
He helped the university become the true university that was created, that embraced the Wisconsin idea, that universities' borders don't end at the campus, but at the border of the state, that we serve the whole state, individuals, communities, and businesses.
And if you have an idea you'd like us to focus on, you can email us at the address on your screen and check us out through our Facebook page, and be sure to check out cw14online.com. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Go out and make it a great day.